Hi. I think that there's been a lot of passion when it comes to how people feel about the Superman films. I feel like there are a lot of people that really love Zack Snyder's Superman and don't like James Gunn's Superman. Well, I feel like there are a lot of other people that love James Gunn's Superman but don't like Zack Snyder's Superman. And it seems really hard to have an opinion on the Zack Snyder Superman stuff or the James Gunn Superman stuff without things feeling very divisive. And I've been feeling like sharing how I personally feel about it. I like Zack Snyder's Superman, and I also like James Gunn's Superman. I think that both of them are actually pretty similar in terms of overall quality. I feel like they're very different films that have different issues and different strengths, but I feel like both of them have some stuff that I personally really don't care for, but also have stuff that I really enjoy. And so I thought it would be interesting to reflect on that. Zack Snyder's Man of Steel doesn't feel like a Superman film to me. I feel like it doesn't have the tone or the heart that I look for in Superman. It doesn't have that sort of optimistic feeling. It doesn't feel quite as fun as I want Superman to be. I think that Jonathan Kent is pretty unlikable in some big scenes. Uh, there are a lot of things that I think could have been done differently, but it's a very interesting film. I don't consider it to be a definitive take on Superman or anything close to that, but I feel like it's an interesting version of the character, and seeing the character act different and have a different way of going about things is very interesting to see. I really like Henry Cavill as Superman. I feel like he has the great leading man presence for Superman. I don't think that he's the best Superman actor, but I think he has the best Superman physique of any actor that's ever played the role. Physically, when it comes to the muscular look of Superman, it's hard to think of any actor that has pulled it off as well as Henry Cavill has. And it really feels like Superman's on screen when I look at him, even if I feel like Superman's characterization is not what I'm used to. I feel like his performance really elevates the film and the other films that he played Superman in. I feel like he really does work as the character. In terms of picking villains, I wish that it was a villain that hadn't been done before, but I actually do really like the film's take on General Zod. And performance wise, I don't know if Michael Shannon can quite be able to top what Terrence Stamp did, but I do really like his performance a lot. And writing wise, I think that Zod is a more interesting villain in Man of Steel than he was in Superman 2 in terms of motivation and how he goes about things. And I think that the fight scenes between Superman and Zod are incredible. They're some of the best action scenes that had been done in superhero films, and some of the best Superman fight scenes of all time are the action scenes in Man of Steel, and a lot of Man of Steel is focused on action scenes, and sometimes action scenes can get a little boring in films, but Zack Snyder has been able to make action scenes so amazing that it's hard not to be interested in what's going on. When it comes to a Superman defeating Zod, I don't like the idea of Superman himself doing that. I think it's very interesting for a character that's dealing with a very difficult situation to try to find a way to solve the problem. It's not what I would want Superman to do, but I feel like it's very interesting. and I think it's a powerfully intriguing moment. And I do think that Man of Steel is a good film. James Gunn's Superman was something that I felt concerned about. I thought that James Gunn could not get the tone right for Superman, but I actually think that James Gunn's Superman does feel more like what I would expect a Superman film to be and would likely want a Superman film to be. It really makes up for what was done badly with Jonathan in Man of Steel. He has a really great scene with Clark, and it's one of the best scenes in the film, and I feel like the film could use more scenes like it that are focused less on introducing a bunch of characters into the universe because there's so many heroes, so many antagonists, so many supporting characters. It feels like one of the most crowded superhero films, which feels weird for a film that isn't a Justice League film or an X-Men film or an Avengers film. Uh, Plot wise, it feels focused on Superman, but with so many characters, it does get really crowded. Uh, I feel like Mr. Terrific has too much to do for a Superman film. Uh, it doesn't feel like he takes the spotlight fully away from Superman or anything. Superman still feels like the protagonist, but I do feel like Mr. Terrific's in the film a little bit too much. Uh, Hawkgirl is used pretty sparingly, and Guy Gardner seems to be there for comedy relief, but Mr. Terrific feels like one of the big prominent characters in the film, which feels a bit odd. He helps Superman out, but it doesn't feel like he plays into the story that much. It feels weird that a lot of the characters that seem to be there for world building stuff like that have more to do than characters like Jonathan and Martha, who are so important to the plot and themes of what's going on. What's done with Crypto, I think, is okay. I do prefer a kinder Crypto, but there's some fun stuff done with Crypto in the film. I'm not a big fan of the take on Lex Luthor in the 2025 Superman film. He feels too insecure. It feels like he's complaining too much. It feels like the confident Lex Luthor charm isn't there, and for him to dislike Superman so much in the first film, it feels like something that could have been built up better. I don't think that the 2025 Superman film needed to focus on Lex Luthor meeting Superman for the first time, but it feels like they've known each other for like an entire show or something, and with us not getting to see it, it's hard for it to have that big of an emotional impact. It's hard for it to work, and I feel like if it's a Lex Luthor that has so much history with Superman, I think I would have preferred an older actor, even though I think Nicholas Hoult is a really good actor. I really like him in the X-Men films. I would have liked a Lex Luthor that uh, was about 10 to 15 years older. I like David Cornsweet as Superman. Um, so far, I don't like him as much as Henry Cavill, but I do think he actually captures the charisma of Superman very well, and I could see him fitting the role technically better than Henry Cavill, and depending on how things go in future films, I could eventually like him more than Henry Cavill. At the current time, I don't, but I decided to go in open minded when it came to David Cornsweet as Superman because I didn't know much about him and I wanted to give him a chance. And I do feel glad that I did because I do like him in the role. And I do think, like how Henry Cavill elevates Man of Steel, I think David Cornsweet does help elevate the 2025 Superman film. Uh, Visual wise, I do think it has a more colorful look than Man of Steel, which I really appreciate. It does look more like a comic book film, but the action scenes are nowhere near as interesting as what's done in Man of Steel. Most of them aren't too memorable and don't really stick with me that much. Um, and I do prefer Zod in Man of Steel over Lex Luthor in Superman, and I eagerly feel excited for another villain that isn't Zod or Lex Luthor to show up in a Superman film. Um, so I think that Superman is a good film. I really don't like what's done with Jor-El though. I feel like I understand that showing how important Jonathan and Martha are to Clark is important, but I don't think they needed to throw Jor-El and Laura under the bus to do that and to make them so antagonistic and unlikable. And Jor-El was such a fantastic character in Richard Donner's take on Superman that I don't like such a great character being treated like a throwaway antagonist and made so unlikable. I think that was not a good decision at all. The Jor-El in Man of Steel isn't nowhere near as memorable as what's done Richard Donner's Superman or anything like that, but I feel like he got the important parts of the character right. He feels like I would want Jor-El to be, and some good stuff is done writing wise. So overall, I think that Man of Steel and Superman have some pretty noticeable stuff that I don't think works, but they both have a lot of stuff that really works for me to the point that I am a fan of both films, even if they're not exactly what I would want Superman to be. I think they're both films that have a lot of fun stuff in them and capture some really impressive things, and they have a lot of impressive attributes. And feel free to let me know what you think.